Hello, and welcome to Accounting 101. I want to start off this lesson with a bit of a background on business accounting. So here at Miles Technologies, we used QuickBooks for 16 years, and when we converted to QuickBooks Online, we quickly found that it didn't have the functionality that we needed in an accounting system. So we decided to build our own accounting system to enable us to do more of our accounting needs online. Fast forward to today, and we currently serve multiple companies' accounting needs, including our own, on business. Business can help you do multiple things with accounting, including track and enter transactions, reconcile your accounts, report on financial history, and project future finances. With that, I'd like to jump into business accounting by first looking at the chart of accounts, which is underneath the accounting tab. So here we click accounting and chart of accounts. This will take us to our chart of accounts, and we can view all of our GL accounts, and these will be organized by their types. These will list our banks and other assets first, followed by our liabilities. And as we scroll down, we can see our equity, income, cost of goods sold, and finally our expense accounts. Now each GL account has a name as a hyperlink, and by clicking on the hyperlink, we can view the GL account activity report. So to simulate this, I can click on the bank. This will open in a new tab so we don't lose our progress in the chart of accounts. And here we can see all of our GL account activity for a particular GL account. This lists not only the types of transactions for each GL account, but also the transaction type, the date, the customer and or vendor that the transaction is related to, any memo that is entered, the offsetting GL account, and finally the amount and the balance of the GL account itself. As previously stated, the type of the particular account is listed in the middle. On the far right is a working balance. If you see a scale, that means this particular account is reconcilable. And finally, we have the edit button, which is located over here, and we can edit the account by clicking on the pen and pad icon, and this will show a pop-up screen. Now the account type will be locked as this is a working account. We can change the account name if we'd like. We can also make this a child account to any parent account that we so choose. And here we can note whether we allow posting to this account or if you want to make this reconcilable. And those can be noted by checking the box on or off to fit our needs. We can also add a brief description if we'd like, and that can be entered here. And this is a multi-line text, so we can go as far down as we'd like and enter as much as we'd like. We can also deactivate an account by clicking the red deactivate button. We can also close to go back to the chart of accounts, or we can save and close to not only go back to the chart of accounts, but also save our progress. Now we can also search within our chart of accounts. So if we want to find a specific account that we're looking for, we can do so by searching for an account type. So for instance, if I want to search for an expense account, I can choose an account name, and I can also include inactive accounts. Now, if I include inactive accounts, let me do all so I can simulate this. We can search for include inactive accounts, and they will be highlighted in pink as soon as we click search. And we can reactivate them by clicking the pen and pad icon and click activate down below. This will bring them back into our chart of accounts, and the pink highlight will be shown as light blue as they are for all the other accounts. Now by clicking on expense, we can search for a particular account type, and every other account type will be hidden from our view, and only those account types will be shown. Now we can also add a GL account here, and we can do so by clicking the Add GL Account button, and this will bring up the same screen that we used to edit our GL account. So here I can enter a name for my new account. I can enter account type, and I can also choose a parent account. And if we choose an account like a credit card, for instance, that reconcilable will fall down. And this will be checked by default, but we can uncheck it if we so choose. And that same box will appear for a bank, so we can go ahead and reconcile our bank at the end of a particular period. We can also import chart of accounts. We can do this by clicking the import button located to the right of that button. And here we have the import selection where we can select from our PC an import sample. And we can also view the mapping for the import. So if we click mapping, this pop-up will highlight the column headers in our CSV file that we can download, which I'll show in just a minute. And these column headers will include account type, account name, account number, is reconcilable, do not allow posting, and a description. Now if we choose download sample, this will download in our browser, and we can open that and see all the column headers as listed. Now the ID is going to be something that business will assign automatically, but things like account type can be entered. And if I choose next, this is where the mapping will occur. We'll be able to map based on those column headers and move all of our information for our chart of accounts in. Now the type will be the bank, accounts receivable, other asset, fixed asset, loan, credit card. So you may see in other systems other current asset or other current liability. Some of these may have to change to the appropriate, like other liability or other asset rather than other current asset. But those are just some minor tweaks that we can do with the import file to bring those in accordingly and match the information within business. So now that we've gone over the chart of accounts, which again we can find under accounting and chart of accounts, the next thing I'd like to go into are the accounting settings. Now the accounting settings will show everything from default accounts and really allow you to set up your accounting system the way you want. So we can do this by going into the company and settings. And from the left, we can click accounting and settings. So these are our accounting settings, and here we can set a lot of different information from our closing date, when our fiscal year starts, and we can change the month in which our fiscal year starts with the drop down below, and click update. We can also note whether we want numbering to be enabled in the chart of accounts, and we can do that by checking off that box. We can set our default accounts receivable account, and we can choose from the drop-down, or we can choose the hover plus option, and this will bring up the same screen we saw on the chart of accounts to add a new GL account. Now please note, since we're adding the default accounts receivable account, the accounts receivable type will be locked as we're going to add a new accounts receivable account. And that same functionality will go for a default accounts payable account. If we want to add a new one, the accounts payable will be locked. And same with the opening balance equity account. It will be an equity account type. So if we want to add a new one, we can do that really easily just from right here with these little hover plus options. And we can also note from the drop downs which default accounts we want to affect here. Now you may notice that I am tracking GL category information. And if you first log into business for the first time, it might look something like this. So this will be checked off by default, but if you do want to enable category tracking, you can check that off. And then from that, your other two options will drop down. Now these other two options are different in terms of their functionality, but essentially if you want to track GL categories at the line item level, you can do so by checking off this box. And if you want to require GL category tracking, you can do so by this checkbox as well. So for instance, if I wanted to track GL categories at the line item level, but not require it, I could check off this and they wouldn't be required by it, but I could still track my GL categories or classes with this turned on. Now you can also override the to be deposited account. Now by default, undeposited funds is the to be deposited account. So we can go into our deposits and manually add in payments that we've received from customers into our bank account. But if you want to override this and just send it to a bank account, you can check this box as well, and these will be sent to your primary bank account. Now, if we want to enable this, we can uncheck this box and choose our undeposited funds account. And again, we can add a new one here with the hover plus, which will be an other asset account. Now, to save all those changes, we'll just click Save. And now our GL settings or accounting settings will all be saved as we've changed them. Now, since we were talking about GL category tracking, I'd like to demonstrate where we can add these in our system. And they're located just about 4 steps up from our accounting settings and GL categories. So this is where we'll add our GL categories, or classes as they're sometimes referred to. And we can do this by clicking the Add New Category button. And here we can choose a category name. And we can also dictate a parent category as well. Now we can simulate this. Maybe we have another location in Boston. So if I add a Boston GL category, I can add that to my GL category list. And if I wanted to make that a child of, say, the electrical income, I can do so as well. And you'll notice this will be presented right below our electrical income and also represent a hierarchy for our GL categories. Now we can also deactivate by choosing the Deactivate button, or we can close or save and close from this dropdown. So that is how you'd get your GL categories in. Now, apart from your accounting settings and your chart of accounts, one other thing that is highly important for all income are sales taxes. And a lot of people record sales taxes. And now to set up our sales taxes, we can go to Sales Taxes underneath Accounting. And here we'll have 2 drop-down features. One is Setup and one is Agencies. Now first, I'd like to go to Setup to show you how we can set up our sales taxes. And this will show how we're recording or accruing our sales taxes. We can choose to report sales taxes as of the invoice date, which is an accrual basis, or upon receipt, which is a cash basis. And we can do so right here with the radio buttons. And we can also choose our sales tax GL account. Now this is how all of our sales taxes flow through. And we can adjust them based on the individual GL accounts for our taxes, such as, for example, a New Jersey taxes payable account will flow through the taxes paid. And we'll get through that with sales tax adjustments, which we'll cover a little later on in this particular session. Now I'm going to save this as accrual basis, and I'll just click Save to make sure that our changes go through. Now before I get to agencies, I would like to talk about the accrual and cash basis, as this is something that a lot of companies defer to. Some companies like to report on an accrual basis, some like to report on a cash basis. And I'd like to demonstrate how you can report on the differences between accrual and cash in business. And to simulate this, we'll go to the balance sheet. Now to get to the balance sheet, we'll go to the Reports tab and Balance Sheet from below. So here's our balance sheet, and this lists the accounting equation. We have the assets and the total liabilities and equities below. And the total assets should equal the equities and liabilities. And if they're not equal, a red pop-up will come up here warning you that your balance sheet is unbalanced. And here, if we scroll down, we can see that our assets match our total liabilities and equities. Now you may see up top we have an as of date, but to the right we have a report basis. And this is how you're going to change your reporting from accrual to cash. So if I want to show my financial status from when I've earned my income or from when I've incurred my expenses, I can choose accrual basis and click search. If I want to show my reporting in terms of finances from when I've received my money or when I've paid for my money, I can choose the cash basis, and I can also choose search. And now that you'll notice, since we've changed the cash, now our balance sheet is not in balance since we've changed our reporting basis. And this is the warning that will come up when your balance sheet is off balance. We can see that from the total liabilities and equities and the total assets. Now if I switch back to accrual and click search, you'll notice we don't get the pop-up, and everything's matching again, as this is reporting in a different manner of accounting. And that can be viewed and changed in terms of accrual and cash with any report that we see here. We can do that with the P&L report or the income statement. We can change accrual to cash. And each report in terms of our P&L and balance sheet is also separated by categories to show our different GL categories up top and all the financials that go down below. Now jumping back into sales taxes, again, we can go to company and settings to find our sales tax setup options, and then we can click accounting sales taxes. So we've gone over setup, and now that we know that we want to report on our accrual basis with our taxes. Now next we'll set up our sales tax agencies, and our agencies are not only the rates that we're going to charge or pay for our sales taxes, but also the vendors who are going to pay the sales taxes to at the end of a particular period. And we can build these by clicking taxes underneath agencies. Now I would like to point out you may see some expanding and collapsing in these settings as I'm doing here. But if you ever want to find something within the settings, you can also search. So if I go up here and I search agencies, agencies will be located here down below, and it'll match what I'm searching for. And that'll work for anything within the settings. So if I type settings, anything with the name settings will show up down below. So we have a search option as well. I just wanted to point that out to make your searching in the settings a little easier. So over here on the right are our list of sales tax agencies. Now we have a lot of them built in the system already, but you'll see that we have some that are county taxes, some that are state, some that are city, and we can build these out by clicking the Add button up top. So when we click the Add button, we can choose either a state tax, a city tax, or an other tax. Now an other tax would be almost like a county. It would be something other than a city and a state. But if we do a state, for instance, we can choose the state from the drop-down, and these will all be abbreviated. So if we choose New York, for instance, now the tax name will default to the abbreviation that we've chosen here, but we can rename that if we want. We can choose the agency. Now the agency is who we're going to pay for a particular period. Now in this case, it's New York. So let's search New York. And here we have the New York Department of Taxation and Finance. So I'll choose that as the sales tax agency. So that's the vendor who are going to pay for the sales taxes that we owe. Now, if you don't have a sales tax agency here or a vendor that you're going to pay, we can quickly add one by choosing the plus option here. And this will allow us to search Google for any results. So for instance, if I delete New York State, I can type New York State taxation, for instance. And by clicking search, Google will try to match anything that fits that criteria. So we'll see we have New York Department of Taxation and Finance, Office of Real Property Tax Services, and we can choose anything from here. And just by clicking add, it'll not only add the vendor, but also add the address, the phone number, and anything that matches that particular entity. Now, since we already have one added in, I'll just close out of that pop-up. But that is a really neat feature that we have within Business, is that if you do a quick add for a customer and or vendor, you can search Google. It'll match that entity as long as it can find it, and also add in the contact information and sometimes even the website. Now for New York, we can enter the sales tax rate for the state. And then we can also note whether shipping is taxable and whether this is a default tax rate. Now, if this is a tax rate we're choosing to charge for most of our customers, we can choose this as a default. If it's not a default, we can simply uncheck that box. And by saving and closing, we'll have that new sales tax rate added to our list of agencies. Now we also have something called tax groups. Now tax groups are something that is comprised of different agencies that we've built in the system. Now to simulate this, I have one pre-built that is called New York Yonkers Actual. And this consists of 3 different tax rates. One is New York. So New York State charges a 4% tax rate for the New York sales taxes. Now New York State also charges by the zip code. So depending on where you're located, it'll add an additional rate. For instance, another 4% in Albany, which will bring that city tax up to an 8% for sales tax. Now to simulate a tax group, we have Yonkers Actual, and this is a tax group that is comprised of 8.875%. And this tax group is derived from the New York taxes, which is 4%, the Yonkers city tax, which is 4.5%, and the special tax, which is a special area of New York City that charges 0.375%. And all that is built in this tax group. So we have the New York, the Yonkers City, and the special added as a tax group, all building up towards our 8.875% tax rate for the city of Yonkers. Now that's a very specific example, but you can build tax groups that are comprised of different rates and simulate an actual place and tax rate within Business. Now before we were talking about the taxes paid account and how things flow through that account essentially to adjust and pay sales taxes. So I'd like just to simulate that since we're on the sales taxes topic. Now, if I want to adjust sales taxes, I can go to accounting, and we have a sales tax area here, which we can pay sales taxes. We can also adjust the amount of sales taxes that we owe. So if I click adjust, this pop-up will appear. Now here we can choose our sales tax agency. So this is the vendor who we're going to pay. And for our purposes, since we're discussing New York State, we'll just click New York State. So again, this will be the vendor who we're going to pay. The sales tax will be the rate of sales tax we're choosing to be affected. Now, since again, I'm requiring GL category tracking, I'll choose my GL category. If you're not tracking GL categories, this asterisk will not appear, and this won't be required in entering your sales tax adjustments. But I'll choose electrical income for my GL category. I can choose my transaction date from the calendar option for when this takes effect. And here's where I'll choose my adjustment account. Now this is the account in which the sales taxes will flow through and from which the adjustment will affect. So if I scroll down to my other liabilities, we have New York taxes payable. I can also search that up here. So if I type New York, we have New York taxes payable that meets our search criteria up here. And I can choose that account for which the amount flows through. And then here I'll choose my adjustment account. So this will be the adjustment for which we have to pay sales taxes. And I'll simulate this just by putting $20. Now we can also enter a negative amount. So if I choose -20, parentheses will be noted indicating that it's a negative amount. But to do a positive, we'll just extract that minus sign, and now the parentheses are hidden. We can write a memo in here if we want. And then we can choose Save and Close. Now when we choose Save and Close, that will essentially adjust our sales taxes. And it will adjust our sales taxes in which we have to pay those sales taxes. So now to pay those off, I can go to Accounting, and under Sales Tax, click Pay. And this is where I can pay off my sales taxes. Now I can choose the bank account that we're going to pay the sales taxes off with. So I can choose my bank account or any other account from the drop-down. My check date. Now to show that adjustment that we just made, all we'll do is adjust our display period. Now by default, this is the last period that just ended, so this is up until the month of August. But if you want to expand our sales taxes, we can choose the calendar and go all the way up until the present day. Now to pay that off, we'll just click the sales tax rate. So here we have the agency. This is the vendor who we're going to pay that off. The payment amount is here. We can adjust this again by clicking Adjust. And you'll note that since we're doing it from the pay screen, the agency, the rate, and the date are already in there. All we'll have to do is choose our adjustment account and our amount. If we want to pay that off, we'll just click the Pay. And it'll notify us that one check was successfully created to pay off that agency. Now, if we want to see that check, we can go into the Accounting Transactions. And I'll do Check and Checks Sales Tax Payment. So by clicking Search, here's that check we just made. It's for $814. And by clicking the transaction number, we can go right into that transaction and see all the details. So here we have that vendor for Pennsylvania. The amount owed is right here. The numeric value of the amount is located on the right with the date as well. Now, if we want to see if the posting is correct, we can choose the posting journal. And here we can see that it debits our taxes paid and it credits our bank account. So that's a basic workflow on how to adjust sales taxes, pay sales taxes, and also build your agencies within business. Now in tomorrow's session, AP and AR, we'll go through also adding sales taxes in things like invoices, bills, and credits, for instance. So apart from sales taxes, which are highly important for multiple different companies, another thing that's highly important are items. And items are used to sell different things within business. And we can build our items list and add our items underneath our inventory settings in accounting. So if I go to accounting, we have an inventory section here. And right underneath inventory, we have items. And if I click items, this will take me to my items list. So by clicking search, I have all my items that are listed in my system. The item name is on the far left. The item type is next to that on the right. The quantity on hand will be available for manufactured or inventory items as you're tracking the quantities on hand for those particular items. Things like item groups, service items, or non-inventory items will not have these quantity on hands available as you're not tracking the tangible quantities. The categories, in terms of the item categories, are located to the right of the quantity on hand. The division for which the item is assigned to will be on the right of that. And then on the very far right, we have both the price and the cost for the particular item, and also a deactivation feature to deactivate the item. Now, if you want to search for an item, we can search for the item name. We can search for the item type by checking which ones we'd like to search for. We can also search for active and inactive items. By clicking search, since we're choosing service and item group, it narrows down the list to show us exactly what we're looking for. Now, if we click this little blue down arrow, we can view more search filters available to us as well. So we can search for the division that the item is assigned to, the item category, and also a manufacturer. And over here on the right, we can also search for the manufacturer part number. So if we know this information, we can search for that as well, along with the batch ID. Now to add an item, we can just choose the add button over here. And with that, I'd like to go into the add an item, and we'll walk through each item type and the differences between them. Now if I choose the type, we'll have all our item types listed below. Now first, I'd like to start with inventory as it's first on the list. So if I click inventory from the item types, we have a lot of information that populates here in terms of how to configure our item. Now right down below type, we have the item category. So for instance, if this is an office material and it's lights, we can choose that from the item category, and we can name it something like light fixtures. So the name will be the name of the actual item, and we can categorize that with our categories. And we can also quickly add a category by choosing the hover plus option. And this will allow us to add a new category and also note whether it's a parent or child category as well. And we can also assign a particular division to this item. So for instance, if this is light fixtures, I'll assign our technicians to this so they can install our lights. Now with inventory items, we also have a reorder point. So if I never want to run below 10 of these particular items, I can put that in the reorder point section. If we know the vendor for the item, I can assign that here. If I know the manufacturer, I can add that as well. And I can also add a manufacturer part number. Now below that, we can also allow vendors to include this item in their bills. And we can do that by noting the check sign. Now if we don't want them to include this on their bills, we can unmark that. We can also note whether it's taxable by default or not. This means that whenever you add the item on something like a sales order or an invoice, for instance, the taxable checkbox will be marked on as soon as you add the item. Now, if we don't want this to be marked taxable by default, we can uncheck that as well. I'm going to leave it checked on. Now on the right, we have the price and cost options. So this will be the price of the particular item that we're going to sell this for. So if we want our customers to pay $35 for this particular item, but it only costs us $10 to make, we can note that between the price and cost options. Now below that is the shipping information. So we can make shipping required on this item. We can choose the weight in which it ships. We can also note whether it's the percentage of the price. And if we do that, we can note the percentage as 30% of $35. Or we can choose a flat rate as well and just charge, say, $2 for shipping. Now, none of this is actually required on the item, and this can all be marked off or made non-existent to fit our needs. And finally, below that is the accounting information. And this is the GL accounts that will flow through the items when we sell or buy these items. So here we can choose an income account for which our income flows through. So if I type sales, for instance, I can see our type is income, so I can choose the sales account. Now inventory, I'll choose the inventory asset account since this is an inventory item. And our cost of goods sold account, I'll choose supplies from the dropdown. Now, just like our default accounts receivable and accounts payable, we do have the hover plus options, and these will add GL accounts and also lock the account types as we're adding them for those account types. So if I hover plus the cost of goods sold, the cost of goods sold account type will be locked, and we can adjust our name here. And that works for asset accounts. So you'll see other asset is locked, and our income accounts. Now income accounts, we will have to choose from below, but we can't choose something like income or asset, for instance. Now our default category is a default GL category, and we can choose that from the drop down below. And our default location is where this particular item should be tracked in terms of its quantity on hand and stored within our inventory locations. So for instance, if I choose showroom, every time I buy this item via a purchase order and a bill, these items will have a default location of the showroom when they're added to a purchase order, for instance. Now the other item type besides inventory is something called non-inventory. Non-inventory is something that we are not tracking the quantity on hand for these particular items. So that means that we're not storing them in any locations. We're not tracking their tangible amounts. So you'll notice that we have some options that disappear from view from our inventory. For instance, if we look at the accounting, our cost of goods sold and inventory asset accounts are gone. Our income account is still assigned, but now we have just an expense account to assign. If we scroll down, we can see our expense accounts and choose what expense account we want this item to flow through. Now our shipping, our price and cost, and most of this information is still available. However, you'll note that because we're not tracking quantity on hand, our reorder point has disappeared as well. Now, if we choose service, service is something that we're going to provide for our customers. So this could be something like labor or maintenance, for instance. And because it's a service item, there's really no manufacturer or vendor. It's something that we are going to provide for our customers. So that manufacturer and manufacturer part number has disappeared from view as well. But you'll see because we're not tracking anything other than the expense and income, our accounting GL accounts remain. And we can change these if we want, depending on the item as well, and simply choose another income account from below. Now I'm going to skip item group. I'll come back to item groups in a little bit. Now if I go to discount, discount is a discount item that we can offer to our customers, and we'll only have one GL account to assign for these particular items. So for instance, if I choose allowances, refunds, and allowances, I can choose this GL account to flow through whenever we add this item on a invoice or a sales receipt or a payment, for instance. A fixed asset is a fixed asset account. This could be something that we're tracking as a fixed asset, and we can also add another asset. So we have a company asset called a MacBook, and if I want this fixed asset account to be related to that internal asset, I can add that asset down here, and I can name the account something like MacBook. Now the reason why we have a fixed asset account type is that let's say our MacBook goes down. It's no longer operational. We need to contract maintenance to get our MacBook back up and running. We can purchase services for our MacBook using the fixed asset account. Somebody can come in and repair our MacBook, and everything will flow through not only the related asset, but also the GL account and item. Now the last two are item group and manufactured. Now if I jump back into item group, item groups are a group of items, and these can include multiple different item types. In one item group, you could add a service item, such as labor, a non-inventory item, such as materials, and an inventory item, such as a Chromebook. So these are three different items here. And once again, we have a service item for labor, a non-inventory item for materials, and an inventory item for Chromebook. Now you may notice since we added an inventory item, we have a location here. This is an inventory location for our company. And if we always want, whenever we have this item group, for the quantities to come out of a particular inventory location, we can select that here. So if I always want the Chromebooks to come out of the showroom, I can select that inventory location down below. And over on the right is the quantity that makes up the item group. So for instance, if when we sell this item group, we need 4 hours of labor, we need 2 things of materials, and 1 Chromebook, we can essentially build this item group and charge for that, for all these items in one line item. Now to simulate why this would be needed, let's take a construction company in example. Now let's say construction, you're building a foundation, so you need a lot of different things, including you need the cement, the rebar, the wood for the framing, and you also need labor just to pour it out and form your foundation. Now, if you don't want the customer to see all the costs for those individual items, you can build an item group consisting of cement, rebar, wood for framing, labor. And when you add that to a sales order or invoice, everything will be under one line item, and you could name that concrete, for instance. And that will hide individual costs for the item and just note how much the customer is paying for your services of concrete. So that's just one example of why an item group, somebody might use an item group and the benefits of using an item group. Now if I say IT services, I'll save this item, and I'll show you in a little bit how this will come up in a sales order and how we can configure this. Now the last and final item type is what we call a manufactured item. So if I click add, I'll click manufactured from the item types. And the manufactured items are something that we're making in-house, and they consist of different items or bill of materials. Now these can be raw materials or individual items that make up a complete part. Now we can add our items from the bill of materials down below using the drop-down. And we can add multiple different things within this item, such as, let's say, an iPad. Let's say we're going to refurbish an iPad, and this is going to be a manufactured item since we're going to manually fix the iPad and sell it as refurbished. So we can add an iPad, materials, and some labor that goes into that particular work. Now, since this incurs one iPad and maybe a few materials, we can add that in here, as well as some labor. And then we can name our refurbished iPad. And here we can either calculate the price from the items added into the bill of materials, or we can just add a lump sum down below and the cost that it takes for us to make this particular item. Now down below we have our accounting. Now because this is a manufactured item, it's something that we're going to make in-house and sell to our customers. Manufactured items essentially act like an inventory item, as we're going to track the quantities that we have on hand, how much of our bill of materials it makes to create these manufactured items, and where we're storing them. So the accounting acts much like an inventory. So we have our income account, our inventory asset account we can associate here, as well as our cost of goods sold account. Now, just like inventory, we can choose our default GL category and our default location for where this item is stored. So I'll click Save and Close to save that refurbished iPad. So now that we've gone through some item types and walked through what each means and how to set them up, now I'd like to demonstrate how to configure an item group. And then next we'll go through how to build a manufactured item in our business system. So first, let's go to item groups. Now, to configure an item group, we'll need a sales order. So to do this, I can either go to customers and sales orders and add them from the list, or I can do this from the handy dandy quick add. So if I choose the plus, I can choose sales order underneath customers, and this will open a brand new sales order for us to configure. So here I can add my customer, and I can also choose my location. But if you want to demonstrate how to configure an item group, we'll add an item group down below. So let's take that item that we just added into our system, the refurbished iPad. And we just configured this in our business system. And if we want to configure how this looks, so now we have an item group. So an item group, again, consists of many different items, and these could be different item types. Now, the example that we used when setting up the item group was concrete. So for instance, if a construction company is building a foundation, they need the rebar, the concrete, the wood to build the frame, and the labor that it costs. Now, if they want to hide the individual costs for those items that make up the total concrete cost, they can use an item group to do that. So here we'll see one lump line item called item group 2. And if we want to configure the price of all those individual items within the item group, we can click the configure hyperlink. So by clicking configure, we have all of our items that make up the item group here. And we can see that this particular item group costs 6 hours of labor, 2 materials, and 2 iPads. Now, to change the prices for these individual things, we can just note the prices down here. So let's say we're going to charge $90 for our labor per hour. You'll see the total changes over here for that particular item, and it also adjusts our item group total down below. Now, same thing for materials. If we change our materials to, say, 120, you'll note that we're adding dollars, and it also configures the addition down here in the item group total. And finally, the iPad, we can choose the total for the iPad. And now we have all of our item totals located over here with the quantities, but we also have the item group total listed here. Now, as we choose our GL categories, since we're requiring them to be tracked, we can choose update item group. And you'll note that now the customer doesn't see all those individual line items. They just see the item group as well as the total lump price in here. So that's one of the benefits for an item group, is to hide all those individual costs into one lump item. Now, the other item group that I wanted to simulate was a manufactured item. And again, these are going to be something that we're going to build in-house, and it's going to be built in our business system, and we do that from underneath accounting. We have an inventory section, and we have builds. Now, if I choose builds, I can search for what we've built previously, and all of these builds will be located here with the item that we've built, as well as the number of the build. By clicking on the build number, we can jump right into the build and see exactly what items were used to build the final item, how many were billed, and the date. Now, if we want to add a new item, we'll just go back to this item build screen and click Add. So here we can choose an item. Now, because this is an item build, these are only going to be manufactured items that come down in the dropdown. So here's that refurbished iPad that we added just a little while ago. Now we have a lot of quantity fields within the item build itself. We have quantity to build, quantity, quantity on hand, and quantity needed. So you might ask, what do these mean? Well, quantities mean how much quantity is for each individual item within our item build or manufactured item. So since one refurbished iPad needs 1 iPad, 5 materials, and 3 labor, if I choose 1, you'll notice after I choose a inventory location, we have a quantity on hand that's 1, quantity needed is 1, our materials is 5. Now, since we're not tracking the quantity on hand for both the non-inventory item, which are materials, and the service item, which is labor, the quantity on hand does not show up down below. Now, if I choose my quantity to build and change it to 2, we can change our item group again. And this red marker will note that we do not have enough quantity to make the actual build. So this will entail us to either purchase more materials, so we can purchase more iPads. We can manufacture more iPads if this is a manufactured item. Or we can make inventory adjustments to bring over those quantities prior to building the item. Now, if I change this back to 1, you'll note that that disappears from view, and that now we're able to go ahead and build our refurbished iPad. Now, to do this, we'll just click either Save, Save and Close, or Save and Add New. So if I click Save, we'll go ahead and save this item build, and now we have a complete manufactured item that we've built from these 3 individual items in our system. It's going to be tracked in the showroom. Our quantity build is locked since we've already built it. And we can view the posting journal to see what's moved in our GL account activity as well. Now, under the actions, if we want to void the item build, we can do that as well. And if we want to close out of it, we can either choose Save and Close or just click Close to go back to the item build screen. Now, there were some things that I've shown in terms of adding items, particularly inventory items, that I'd like to demonstrate where these things are located. First off, I'd like to go through inventory locations. Now, in between our item groups and item builds, we've been choosing inventory locations to associate, and some of our items we've even chosen default locations to associate to the items. Now, to either add or view these inventory locations, we can go back into the settings, and to do this, we can go to Company and Settings. Now, to search for inventory, we can choose Accounting, and underneath Accounting is Inventory. And you'll note that underneath Inventory, we have an Items section with things like categories, electronic materials, and shipping methods, and underneath that is Locations. So if I choose Locations, we'll get a list of all of our inventory locations that are built within our business system. So here we have our showroom, our warehouse, and now our warehouse is a parent location. And if I choose the little triangle, we can expand our child location, which is the receiving area. And we can click into each and every single one of these by clicking on the name. And we can adjust the name. We can also note a parent location for the account for the location, and also add a description in here as well. Now, if we want to add a new location, we can just click the Add New Location button, and the same screen will show up here. So we can add a location name and also choose a parent location. We can search for location names here. And if we want to show any inactive locations that we currently have, we can choose this box and click Search to show our inactive locations. Now, something else that we went through in our item creation are item categories. So if we want to categorize our items, we can use categories underneath items. And this will allow us to not only view our item categories, but also create new item categories. And we can expand all of these by clicking the triangles and show not only the parents, but also the child categories for all of our items. So you'll note that we have a labor item category with a child of consulting labor. Materials, we have parts and discount, and office supplies, we have lights. We can add a new category very easily just by typing in a name and choosing Add. So if I add cleaning supplies, the new category will be added to our list. And if I want to make this a child, I can simply drag and drop until whatever parent is highlighted in blue and drop, and it'll automatically be assigned as a child category. Now, if we want to expand all, rather than clicking all the boxes, we can choose Expand All, and this will expand all of our parents to note their child. We can also collapse as well to just show the parent categories. Now, we also have shipping methods that we can add, and these will be shipping methods for things like our purchase orders. So here we have our shipping methods that are in our system. So we have UPS, FedEx, FedEx Blue, USPS, and UPS Ground. Now, if we want to edit any of these things, we can click the pen and pad icon, and here we can change the shipping method name. And if we want to add a new shipment, we can just click the Add New Shipping Method button, and here we'll just be able to add a new shipping method down below. Now we can also choose inactive shipping methods. So if we've deactivated any of these, we can note that they are inactive by clicking Inactive and Search. And likewise, if we want to see all our active, we can choose Inactive and Search to show our active shipping methods. Now the last item underneath the item settings is our electronic materials. So if I choose electronic materials underneath items, these are things that we're going to store within particular items. So for instance, we have a brochure that's located and it's a document. We can view the brochure by clicking View. We can also click the brochure name to show not only the name, but what type it is. We can choose a category, and we can also select to upload another document if we so choose. Now, if we want to add a reference material, we can choose Add Reference Material up here. And this will allow us to choose the type of reference material it is, whether it's a link, a note, which here we can enter notes about the item, or a document. And the document will allow us to select a file from our system. And we have a lot of formats that can be uploaded, and our max file size for electronic materials is 100 megabytes. Now our categories are located here, but we can easily add a new category by choosing the Add New button. And here we can add a new category for our electronic materials. So for instance, if I choose to add a design category for our electronic materials, I can do that here. And then by clicking that item, you'll see design appears in the dropdown. So we can easily categorize our electronic materials, add new types, and upload anything from our PC into this file. So if I choose to add a design outline, I can click Save and Close, and now it's added to our list of reference materials. Now to associate a reference material to an item, we can do so by going into an individual item within our items list. Now again, to get to our items list, we can go to Accounting and Items underneath our inventory. And here we can click Search to show all of our items. Now if this is a design feature, let's go into the manufactured item, which is improved iPad. So since this is a manufactured item, I can add a reference material, which is design. You see we've already added a brochure for this item. But if we want to add the design outline, we can choose that particular reference material from the list and associate and close, and that will be added to the particular item. Now to save that all, we can just choose Save and Close, and that will not only add the reference material, but it'll also bring us back into the item list while saving our changes. Now, speaking of items, I kind of hinted to this when we were discussing item builds and bringing over quantities, and that is an inventory adjustment. Now, to perform an inventory adjustment, we can do this underneath our Accounting tab. And underneath Inventory, we have Adjustments, and this will bring us to our Inventory Adjustments screen. Here we can search for previously made inventory adjustments. We can search for actual adjustments via the adjustment date ranges, the status, whether it's been posted or voided. And if we choose the little blue arrow, we can actually search for individual items made on our inventory adjustment and the inventory locations that the adjustments were affected. Now, if I want to view a previously made inventory adjustment, I can choose the number on the inventory adjustment, such as 3. This will open that inventory adjustment for us to view all the items affected, the type of inventory adjustment it was, and what was adjusted. Now, in this particular case, it's a quantity adjustment, and we can see that we brought in 2 to our showroom, and the item was a battery. Now, if we want to make a brand new inventory adjustment, we can just click Add on the inventory adjustment screen. So here we have our default account, which is opening balance equity. We can change this as needed by erasing and choosing the GL account from below. So this might be something like an inventory asset or an inventory adjustment account that you have on your chart of accounts. For our purposes today, I'll just remain with the opening balance equity. Now, the adjustment date is when this will take effect. We can write a memo here to note anything related to the inventory adjustment, possibly why we're adjusting our inventory. And up top is a hyperlink for the type. Now, there's 3 types of inventory adjustments in business. And if I click on quantity, we'll note the 3 types from the dropdown. So the first is quantity, and the quantity will allow us to bring in just the quantities for the particular items into our business system. We also have value, and this will allow us to bring over just the value for the items into our business system. And we also have quantity and value, which will allow us to add both the quantity and value at the same time with each adjustment. Now, if I choose quantity, I can see the quantity by choosing an item from the dropdown. So for instance, if I choose Chromebook, we'll see all the inventory locations that we can adjust this to, and we can change our adjustment amount with the adjustment column. And we can add as many as we want with this to reflect our current inventory status of our company. Now it's important to note that the quantity adjustment area will add the new adjusting quantity. The new quantity will actually adjust the quantity adjustment and the quantity on hand. So for instance, if I do a -1, you'll note the adjustment is -1. So it's important to note that the quantity adjustment is what you're adjusting. The new quantity will affect not only the quantity on hand, but also affect the quantity on hand plus the adjustment. And we can also add as many items as we want by affecting them with the drop-down. So for instance, if I choose the improved iPad, I can choose what locations they go into. And we have our GL category. So if we want to affect our GL category per item, let's say they're different, we can choose the GL category for electrical income for our Chromebook and our mechanical income GL category for our improved iPad. Now, if we change this from quantity to just value, you'll note that the screen looks a lot different. So now we just have the new unit value. So this is the value that our item is going to be. So for instance, if I say this is going to be $50, now you'll note that we have a 0 recent cost, which means the new cost or value will be $50. And we have a recent cost of $1,600 in the improved iPad. Now, just like before, we can choose our GL categories, and we can affect them differently just by simply erasing and choosing the correct GL category from the dropdown. Now, the last one is quantity and value. And here we'll have the value up top, right across from the item name, and the quantities will be down below with the inventory locations. And here's our quantity adjustment and our new quantity as well. Now, all of these also have import fields. And if you want to import adjustments, we can choose the import adjustment. And this will populate a pop-up in which we can select a file. We can download a sample CSV file. And we can also import the mapping for the import. So if I choose the mapping, we'll know all the column headers in our sample CSV file that we'll need to fill out. So here are the item name, the location, the quantity that's going to be adjusted, the new value for the item, and the GL category name if we're tracking GL categories. And we can, as we change the inventory type, we'll need to change our inventory adjustment since the mapping will differentiate for those particular adjustments. We can also add attachments for these as well. And we can do that simply by clicking on the cloud icon and choosing a file down below to attach. Now, the extensions for these are quite versatile, and the max file size per document is 10 megabytes. Now, something else you might see in the system if you're tracking GL categories is the default category noted up top. Now, we can affect these by different line items by choosing the category down here. But if we choose default from up top, that'll change all of our GL accounts down below and affect all of our items simultaneously. We can override them if we chose the default here, simply by erasing and choosing the correct one. Now, in terms of our items, we can run an inventory valuation report, and I can do this underneath the reporting tab, and we have inventory valuation at the bottom of the list. So this will show us all of our items that we currently have. Now, please note that these are all inventory items since this is an inventory valuation. So things like labor or materials that are either service or non-inventory will not appear on this report. Now here we have our quantity on hand, and we can view what makes up the quantity on hand by choosing the hyperlink. And this will open in a new tab. And this will be what we call the item quick report. So by choosing search, we can see everything that went into building up to our current quantity on hand of 20. So you can see that we started with 100, we sold 15, and all of this builds up to our current quantity of 20. Now that goes for any individual item on our inventory valuation report. And it not only shows the date of each particular transaction, it also shows the type of transaction, the customer and vendor that it was associated with, as well as any memo that was entered for those transactions. I can change the date ranges up here to show a particular date range that I want to report on. And all that functionality is available for any of these hyperlinks within the report. Over here, we see the asset values and the percent of total assets. Now up here are search filters, so we can search for an item category to narrow down our results. We can also search for individual inventory locations, individual items. We can report as of a certain date. And finally, we can search for inactive and active. Now, if we have 0 quantity as in hand, like for instance, the Chromebook, the indoor security camera, or the outdoor security camera, we can suppress these items by choosing the checkbox up here, which will suppress quantities with 0 quantity on hand, and choose search. And those items will be hidden from our view. Now, if we want to show those items once again, we can simply uncheck that checkbox and click search, and those items will be added right back into the report. So with that, I would like to conclude our session on setting up not only our accounting, but our inventory and items. I would like to thank everybody for registering and attending our Business Academy session today. And I hope that you learned some valuable information that you can use in your business system. I'd like to open this time for any questions, and I'll leave this meeting line open for about 5 to 10 minutes to ask any questions that anybody may have. If you don't have any questions, please feel free to leave our meeting. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending our Business Academy session.